morning. As a way of a conclusion for the Sefer Shoftim, I want to share with you a piece from the Keren Ora commentary in the Talmud on a Mishnah in Tainus that will give a little bit of closure to the unusual story of the daughters who were dancing in a circle in Shiloh, and how the 200 remaining people in Binyamin who needed a wife were instructed to snatch the women from there. So what is exactly the story over there? So the Malbim, the Radak, wants to know what is the miyamim from time to time. So he suggests it could have been any one of the holidays that was celebrated in Shiloh, Pesach, or Sukkot as such, or Yom Kippur. So let's see what the Mishnah in Tainus has to say. Mishnah in Tainus Daf Chaf Vav Amud Beis says, "V'hoyu yomim tovim liyisrael kachamisha sor ba'ov ukiyom haKippurim." And Reb Shimon Gamliel says there was no holidays for the Jewish people as joyous as the 15th of Av or Yom HaKippurim. That what happened? Shabahen benos Yerushalayim yotzis bichlei lavan shu'ulim, that the daughters of Jerusalem would go out with borrowed garments of white. Why? Shelo levayish es mi she'ein lo, not to embarrass people who don't have any. And also, what would they do? Ubenos Yerushalayim yotzos v'cholos bakramim, and the Jewish girls would go out and dance in the vineyards. V'meho yomros, and what would they say? Bocher, young man, son einecha, lift up your eyes, ure'ei ma tobar lach, and see what you're choosing for yourself. Yitein einecha banoi, don't pay attention to beauty, but rather pay attention to family. And then it quotes the verses at the end of Eishes Chayil, Sheker achein vehevel yofi, grace is false and beauty is vain. Isha yiras Hashem itasalol, a woman who fears Hashem shall be praised, etc., etc. And similarly, Reb Gamliel expounds on the psukim that says in Shir HaShirim, "Senu re'ena benos Sion b'melech Shlomo, go forth and gaze, O daughters of Zion, upon King Shlomo. Ba'torah she'itrolo imo b'yom chasunaso v'yom simchas libo." As he was adorned with the crown his mother made for him on the day of his wedding, on the day of his heart's joy. And what is the day of his wedding and the day of his heart's joy? Yom Chasunaso, the day of his wedding, that is the day of the giving of the Torah, and the day of his joy is the building of the Beis HaMikdash that should be built speedily in our days. So obviously these last two clauses, the day of his wedding and the day of his great joy, is a reference to the giving of the Torah and the building of the Beis HaMikdash. So what is the connection of Yom Kippur and the 15th of Av of being such wonderfully happy days? On the one hand, the daughters of Jerusalem would go out and dance, and the men would select a wife. And also it's referred to as the day of great joy, the day of the wedding for King Solomon, of the giving of the Torah, and the day of the Simchas Libo, the day of his greatest joy, is the building of the Beis HaMikdash. So, to understand this, the Keren Ora explains, and as well, we will see the connections between a number of events and dates in the calendar. The 17th of Tammuz, which begins the 3 weeks, and the 9th of Av, which ends the 3 weeks, and Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, and also Yom Kippur. So Keren Ora explains that the ultimate purpose of creation is that Hashem's primary desire was to impart two gifts upon the Jewish people. Number one, the precious gift of the Torah, the infinite wisdom of Hashem, the intimate understanding of what Hashem is about vis-a-vis this world and what He wants from us. As we know, Hashem wrote, as it were, Anocha nafshe kosvis v'yavis, that I wrote myself down and gave it to you. The greatest gift Hashem could give us is the closeness to Him that can be manifest in the document of the Torah that He wrote, which carries His wisdom. And the second great gift is that His Shekhinah should dwell upon us. And the primary place for that to happen is in the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. These are the two gifts that Hashem gave us. That's why He took us out of Mitzrayim, as the fourth and fifth expressions of redemption explain. the final goal is that we should be taken to Him for a people as upon the giving of the Torah, and He will bring us to the land of Eretz Yisrael, and this will be our intimate quarters in which we will be close to Hashem. However, there were two events in the calendar that set this back in a terrible way. The first is the 17th of Tammuz. It's the 17th of Tammuz when the Jews were waiting for Moshe to come back down, and we know the terrible sin of the golden calf, and subsequently Moshe breaking the luchos, which shows that there was a diminishment of this high level of Torah that the nation had reached at Sinai. Other events that happened on the 17th of Tammuz, the Korban Tamid ceased to be brought. The continual sacrifices represented the obligation of a Jew to incessantly pursue the study of Torah. As it says, V'gisa b'yomam v'layla, there's a tummy, that's midius, a consistency that Torah has to have. And that was nullified with the Korban Tamid that was no longer brought. We also were told that on the 17th of Tammuz the walls of Yerushalayim were breached, and the walls are a symbol of Torah. As it says in Shir Hashirim, I am like a wall. And the rabbis explain that Torah study builds a protective wall against the external Yetzer Hara. So the breaking of the wall represents the breaking of a fortification of Torah. As well, we are told on the 17th of Tammuz, a posthumous burnt the Torah, and an idol was placed in the sanctuary. And the rabbi said that idolatry is tantamount to the denial of the entire Torah. So you see, a number of terrible events happened on the 17th of Tammuz. And therefore, the events of 17th of Tammuz show a retreat, a falling back of this gift of Torah that Hashem gave us. One great tragedy. But when we lose the Torah, it's only symptomatic of what the second great tragedy is going to be. And that is ultimately, as we saw on Tisha B'Av, the Jewish people forfeited the second gift that Hashem gave them, that of the dwelling of His divine presence. And we know as a result of the sin of the spies who spoke slanderously about the land of Eretz Yisrael, that generation would not merit to go into Eretz Yisrael, and therefore that Shekhinah that would be with them in Eretz Yisrael, they would not experience. As a matter of fact, after that time, Hashem did not speak to Moshe for a very long period of time as well. On Tisha B'Av, we know as well the second and third temples were destroyed. That clearly shows that those gifts of the place for the Shekhinah to dwell were taken away. As well, with the area of the Temple Mount was plowed over on that date. It's a further desecration of the sanctity of those holy grounds. And on this day as well, Beitar fell, a great fortress, and it fell, the rabbis say, because of the sin of the people was their apathetic attitude to the destruction of Jerusalem, feeling they had a place of Beitar on their own. So we have the two great gifts, the gift of the Torah and the gift of the divine presence resting amongst the Jewish people in the Holy Temple. And those were taken away because of the sins of the 17th of Tammuz, which is an abrogation of the Torah, and the 9th of Av, which shows that the Jewish people are not yet ready and suffered losses in terms of being able to be close with the divine presence in Yerushalayim or places holy like that. So therefore, we need something to counteract that, the detrimental effects of the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. And Hashem's great mercy, He granted us 2 days laden with goodness, which strengthens our possession of these two treasures. So therefore, vis-a-vis the breaking of the first set of the tablets of the covenant, so what happened? Ultimately, Hashem gave us another set of luchos and Yom Kippur, which remains eternally a day of purification from this. And really, with all the tshuva and everything we know about Yom Kippur, we know the rabbis tell us that without Torah it is impossible to do tshuva. You could try all day long to do tshuva, but as we learn in the Mesilas Yesharim and so many Sfarim, that Torah brings to all the levels that we're looking for. If you don't know what Hashem wants from you, you don't know what to return back to. The power of Torah, which focuses a person on a spiritual realm instead of a physical realm, is the basis of all tshuva. And therefore the two luchos were given on Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur would forever remain a day of tshuva and a day of strengthening of Torah. On the other hand, Chamisha Sar B'Av, the 15th of Av, is a counterbalance to Tisha B'Av, which prepares the foundation to welcome the divine presence. And that began on the very first Tu B'Av, when the Jews in the wilderness would go to the graves every 9th of Av for 1/40th of the Jewish people to die, for 15,000 people to go into their graves, never to come out again, every Tisha B'Av. But in the final year of the 40th year, the Jews went into the graves and they did not die. And it was not until the 15th of Av, when they saw a full moon, that they clearly understood that the generation would no longer die. And those remaining people would be free to enter the promised land, where the sanctuary would be built and would be a source of closeness to Hashem. And therefore, from that time on, people understood that Chamisha Asor B'Av is a day in which we could become closer to Hashem. There are many other events that happened on the 15th of Av. It was a day that the roadblocks to Yerushalayim, that forced people to no longer go to Yerushalayim during the period of the Malachim, and rather to go to the idols either in Dan or in Beersheba. So finally Hoshea removed those roadblocks, and the Jewish people could now go back to Yerushalayim. That happened on the 15th of Av. The 15th of Av is also a time when all the cutting of the wood was finished, and it was called the Yom Tavar Magal, the day of the breaking of the axe, which represented the rectification of the plowing of the temple grounds with iron tools. And as well, and what reflects to what we need for our topic in Sefer Shoftim, that on this day permission was granted not only for the 200 males of Binyamin to come back to the Jews, but the Sanhedrin at that time determined on Tu B'Av that the vow that no one would be allowed to marry off their daughter to someone from Binyamin, that vow was rescinded, as they found a loophole finally, and the loophole being that they said that they could not marry off their children to the tribe of Benjamin, but their children could marry off their children. Grandchildren could be married off. And therefore the 15th of Av was a day when Binyamin would be reunited with the Jewish people, and the complete Shvuah was removed. And as well, another thing happened, that the prohibition of women who have land in Eretz Yisrael to be not allowed to intermarry with other tribes, that was rescinded as well. And what was so critical about this, as we learned in the Malbim said, why was Bnei Yisrael so interested in saving Binyamin? Because they realized that they'd be missing one tribe of the Jewish people. The divine presence could not dwell. And that is the whole point of what Tu B'Av is all about. Tu B'Av is a rectification to bring people back, a concept of unity, a unity that enables the divine presence to come back to be with the Jewish people. This was the dream that Yaakov had with the 12, after the dream with the 12 stones forming as one. If they're all there, you're possible to be one people. And the Shekhinah cannot dwell amongst the people unless there's unity within the people, and therefore there'll be unity between them and Hashem. And as history went on, we also know that the 15th of was the day where the slain of Beitar were able to return, meaning to say their bodies were able to be buried. After many, many years, the miracle happened. They did not decompose, and there was permission to bury them. And as it were, even the dead could be reunited with the living. And therefore we can now understand what is the idea with the dancing and the shidduchim and all that would happen. Miyamim yamimo. It would either be on Yom Kippur or either be on Tu B'Av. And most significantly, Tu B'Av would seem to fit in better over here, although both would make sense. Clearly the Jewish people were lacking a learning of Torah, and more importantly, they lacked a degree of unity. The whole story of the destruction of Binyamin, the whole Pilegish Begiva incident, showed a tremendous lack of unity amongst the Jewish people. A terrible blow to the Shekhinah, to a new nation that's trying to build up the land of Eretz Yisrael, according to the opinions that say the story of Pilegish Begiva happened very early on in the story. And therefore, what had to happen was something to show a great sense of unity amongst the Jewish people. what Tu B'Av represents is that the Shekhinah now can become comfortable amongst the Jewish people. And therefore, this is what it means when the Mishnah says that go out the daughters of Zion to see King Shlomo on the day of his wedding, on the gladness of his heart. The day of the wedding is the day of the giving of the Torah, and the gladness of his heart is the day of the building of the Holy Temple. When a person truly lives with Torah, and Torah is the guiding principles of one's life, then Torah teaches you how to use your eyes, what to look at and what not to look at, and not to be fooled by one's eyes. And that's what the girls were telling the boys: do not necessarily be fooled by beauty. Beauty isn't what determines everything. It's what kind of quality individual you are marrying. And therefore, although what would appear to be something that was not very modest, the girls dancing, but on such a day, Yom Kippur, on such a day of Tu B'Av, where the Jewish people saw things in a much more spiritual light, in a much more unifying light, and understanding what a shidduch really is, that a shidduch is not just a man or a woman taking care of their physical lustful desires in a legal fashion, but understanding that bringing two half souls together, reuniting two half souls that have been split apart from the Kisei HaKavod, and when the man and the woman get together, the Ish and the Isha, they have the separate letters. The Ish has the Yud, the Isha has the Hey, and bringing the Yud and Hey and bringing the Shekhinah into their home. Bringing into the Shekhinah in every home is continuation of bringing the Shekhinah back into Eretz Yisrael. So why were they dancing by Shiloh? Although the verses in the Talmud are referencing to Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim is after Shiloh was no longer the central area of Kedusha. But in the times of the Shoftim, Shiloh was the central area of the Kedusha. And this will answer the question we discussed yesterday: why only Shiloh? Another answer: because Shiloh was the place where the divine presence was felt. And in a place where the divine presence is felt, the laws of physics are stood on their head. And people don't look at things in merely a physical way, but people look at things in a very spiritual way. And therefore we could say that even though it was in the day of the Shvod HaShoftim, and everyone did was Yosher Be'inav, and we could learn it negatively. There are those who maybe looked at what they thought was good to their eyes, but there were different people with different eyes. As the daughters who were dancing around, there were different daughters. Daughters who were pretty said, yes, look at beauty, but the other ones who weren't said, no, don't look at beauty, look at other factors. There's always that free will choice to learn how to look. And those who know how to look at a perspective kala as primarily one thing. Everything in life, we have to ask one question: how will this thing, this activity, this acquisition, this next step in life, how will it get me closer to God? How will it get me to fulfill the Torah? How will it get me to bring unity and a closeness to Hashem? And if a person looks at a woman, and a woman looks at a husband, as how will this person complement me in such a way that I will be unified within myself, unified within the Jewish people, unified with Hashem? And there could be no more holy activity than that. And that is how the Navi wants to end Sefer Shoftim, a very bizarre book, a book with many ups and downs. But at the end of the day, through all the terrible things that happened, finally we had different tribes marrying with each other, which gives us a hope that the unity of the Jewish people will be once again seen. And that is what Reb Tzadok HaKohen says, based on a medrash. He says that the rebuilding of the third and final temple will take place on Chamisha Sar B'Av, on the 15th of Av, and the eternal union of Hashem and the Jewish people will be achieved. And it is this joyous day which he explains what the rabbis meant when it says V'yom Simchas Libo, on the day of God's, on the day of His, meaning Hashem's heart's bliss. This refers to the building of the Beis HaMikdash, which we will hope that will come speedily in our times. Amen. With this we conclude. Baruch Hashem, we made a siyum on Sefer Shoftim. God willing, Hashem should bless us that we should be able to continue and open other Sfarim and finish other Sfarim. And in the merit of our learning Torah and feeling a unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, unity within this classroom and within the World Wide Web, we should have that kind of unity that will indeed bring the bringing of the Mashiach b'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.